Hello and welcome. I'm James Baggott, founder of Car Dealer Magazine, and today I'm talking to Jaguar Land Rover's UK Managing Director, Rawdon Glover. Good afternoon, Rawdon.
Hey, good afternoon. How you doing?
Thanks ever so much for joining us, Rawdon. Now we've got about 20 minutes of your time, so I'm going to crack straight on to the questions. Firstly, it's obviously been an incredibly difficult time for dealers. How have your dealers been managing in this difficult situation?
I think our retail network, pretty much like everybody else's, has effectively gone into sort of a form of hibernation, really. Like everybody else, I think they've benefited hugely from the government furlough scheme. I think the speed with which the government brought that out, and fortunately the speed of the payments has been really welcomed. And obviously they've had to make some tough decisions about actually what parts of their business to scale down, generally most of it, and what to keep going. I'm pleased to say that pretty much all of our businesses have been able to maintain a skeleton staff to ensure that we can deal with inquiries. And we've also been able to make sure that we maintain a national coverage in terms of after sales to make sure we're looking after key workers and the vulnerable, and making sure that we, as I say, we can make sure we keep our customers mobile in their time of need. And actually what we've been seeing over the last probably week or so is more and more of those workshops open as we go through that. So yeah, so that's definitely evolving through that time. But yeah, it's very much control the costs, make sure that every single opportunity is leapt on, really more towards sort of building an order bank rather than actually delivering cars at the moment, obviously. And that was very much, what was to be done for probably the first 4 or 5 weeks. What's interesting in the last probably 3 weeks is, 2 or 3 weeks, it's very much flipped. And the focus is increasingly really gearing up for restart, and what should that restart look like, and making sure they're absolutely prepared for that.
So we'll touch on those subjects on a moment, if you don't mind. Can we just get a picture of what the network looks like now? I mean, how many dealer partners do you have, and how many outlets across the UK?
We've got 130 sales points.
130 sales partners, and how many dealer groups do you work with? I mean,
we work with approximately 18 groups, and they account for probably 90, about 90% of our volume.
So when this all kicked off, Rawdon, what went through your head as the managing director of Jaguar Land Rover?
Well, I think probably like everybody else, you immediately think, well, how on earth are we going to be able to, firstly, how are we going to be able to operate remotely? Because actually we literally, with 2 days notice, we moved out of our offices in Whitley, and we needed to stand up an operation, whether it was a contact centre, make sure our roadside services. So immediately you're thinking, how do we make sure that we can have all of those essential services, whether it's accounts payable to pay retailers or whatever else, up and running in a very short period of time. So that's very much the most immediate thought in terms of what you're going to do. The next point really was then a case of what can we do to support our network through those times. So I think we're no different to any other OEM in the fact that there would have been a raft of measures which reflect that we're not in normal trading. So margin structure, given relief on that, additional funding to support their liquidity, ability to reduce costs going into the retailer wherever possible for services that are clearly not up and running. We've had to look at actually how we then deliver essential services. So we were right in the middle of the Defender launch as an example. Normally we would be training people face to face. At very short notice, clearly had to say, right, we've got to do all this, we've got to do it remotely, both technically and in terms of the sales process. So that was really, I guess, the first phase was very much in kind of 2 periods. That initial, we need to be able to operate. Then it was really, what can we do to ensure that the retailers are given as much support from us as possible. And then really now, I guess we're coming out towards the other bit where we're thinking about what's next.
Yeah, and on that point, we've written a lot about it in the last few days and weeks about the restart. What can you tell us about what you expect the changes dealers are going to have to make to reopen if and when they're allowed by the government?
Yeah, so undoubtedly all retailers, so this doesn't just apply to the JLR network, I think there are certain fundamental things that we absolutely need to be doing. First and foremost, for the safety of our colleagues, the people that are working the retailers. So we've got to make sure that we fully understand how social distancing works, how we're going to operate that from a colleague perspective, and how social distancing is going to work with customers. We also need to make sure that in terms of sort of hygiene and in terms of how we are, right down to the detail of, right, okay, if you've got special tools that are being shared, how do we make sure that those are wiped down? How do we make sure that, areas within the retailer that are public facing are constantly kept hygienic? Making sure that we've got availability of hand sanitizer, what type of equipment we have in our restroom facilities, because clearly you can't have towels. We probably shouldn't be having hand dryers, moving along to those sorts of things. So I think there are a raft of things across those three. I think communication is also key. I think there's a real responsibility on us to educate our customers as to what they can expect when they come into our businesses. Not only to give them comfort that we've thought of the safety perspectives, but also to manage their expectations. So, for example, the guidance that we're developing would say, within sales and after sales, wherever possible, we would be looking at appointment only. Now, clearly, we need to make allowances occasionally if somebody does come in, but it's making sure that the customers understand that, and it's for their safety, because with the greater controls, what we can do is make sure that their safety and our staff safety is absolutely maximised. So there are, as I say, a raft of things that will inevitably change, probably for the medium term. I don't think this is something we're going to be living with for, and that's really clear. It's not something we're living for weeks or maybe even single months. This is definitely with us for the rest of the calendar year, and quite conceivably well into 2021 as well. So initially learning how to do that, and also making sure that we're preparing staff for the return to work, is absolutely fundamental in terms of what they can expect, not only to give them the confidence, but also to make sure that when they come in, we're absolutely observing the right protocols.
The guidelines that you've seen from the government so far, are they achievable for car retailers to get back to work?
Well, the guidelines that certainly I'm referring to is we participated on an initiative with the NFDA and the SMMT. So representatives of the NFDA executive, representatives of car section committee, we developed what we believe are very appropriate set of guidelines. So these are guidelines as opposed to real detailed processes, but they are guidelines that we believe are able to be implemented across the entire industry. Now, again, those are being in the final throes of ratification as we speak. So I think I sat on the SMM car section committee today, and it was ratified there. And I think the NFDA similarly are doing that. So the approach we've taken is to say, this is how we as an industry think we should operate. Now, clearly, there are elements of that which are still to be confirmed, such as the use of PPE and exactly how social distancing should work, which is where really that's where we need the clear guidance from government and Public Health England. But in terms of the other aspects of how we operate, I think we felt it was really important that we put our best foot forward, and we devise that really in lockstep between the retailers and the OEMs, rather than either do in isolation.
It's good to hear that there's some guidelines being put together, and that they're a long way down the line. When do you think, if you were a betting man, we would be back open and selling cars again?
Well, I guess I was hoping that it might be the 11th. I guess ultimately the government will decide, and will certainly clearly adhere to their decision. I think it's probably looking like the 18th of May earliest would be, if you push me for a date.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree with you. From the people I've spoken to so far, I'll probably say the same. I think the difficulty will be if Boris does come out with the guidelines on Sunday, you can't say to dealers, right, you're opening up tomorrow, can you?
No, and I think, whilst a number of our retailers are starting to gear up their after sales because they're seeing a greater demand in the workshops, you're absolutely right. For us to properly prepare all of our showrooms, all of our, the salespeople that we're going to unfurlough, that will take time. But I think it's understood, certainly by NFDA and SMMT, that it's not going to be binary. It won't be like switching a light on and everybody's up and running the first day and everybody's back up to full speed. Obviously, I think the whole industry is keen to get back to work. And clearly the level of demand will dictate just how quickly everybody returns back to work within the retailers, and obviously keen to unfurlough as many as possible, but that clearly will be demand led.
I think that is probably one of the problems that I've heard a lot is the end of the furlough scheme and quite how that's going to look. If it was a cliff edge, and we've written about it many times on the website, it will cause chaos for this industry. I mean, what are your hopes as an industry leader here for the end of that furlough scheme?
I think we would hope that the furlough scheme would be able to be extended, but clearly can't be indefinitely. But I think if we're able to get the green light to open in May, even if it is to middle towards the end of May, then it's certainly throughout May, June, we would anticipate being able to unfurlough, a good number of staff. So it's certainly not it's not forever, but certainly then it really is, I guess, depends on what the level of consumer demand is, which probably leads to the question of stimulus, which is probably the next point where the discussion with government will go.
And on that point, we've written about calls for a scrappage scheme already. I mean, that helps in different areas of the market. What do you think a stimulus could look like? I mean, I suppose a cut in VAT would have a similar impact, but across all sectors. What would you like a stimulus to look like for this industry?
I think without getting into too much specifics, I think the key thing for stimulus is that it's got to be able to work across the whole industry. It's got to be simple for customers to understand. It's got to be able to be just as applicable in, for somebody buying a budget car as to somebody buying, a luxury vehicle. The whole industry needs stimulus. So, I mean, it's got to be wide ranging. It's got to be simple. We'd really like it to be in place. If anything was put in, it would to be put in place by July, because I think really we work in quarters, as you know, and actually being able to integrate that into our quarterly sales and marketing plans would be key. I guess those are the key things for me that I would be looking for in terms of any scheme.
Do you think it should be linked to emissions and target older cars, or do you think it should incentivise hybrids and electrics going forward?
My priority, and again, is that it needs to incentivise the whole industry. That's the first and foremost. I think that the exact detail of, for example, if you were to promote, we're very lucky. We've got a very strong EV in the market, but if you were to focus it on EVs, there isn't sufficient supply of EVs to make the demonstrable change, which I think we as the industry need, and which the government would like to see in terms of the industry. So I think it's really about navigating through that quite carefully.
So on that front, on the strong EV front, it was nice to see the Jaguar back near the top of the sales chart. What's the story behind that, Rawdon?
Well, we had a couple of large fleet deals. One, one in the public sector. They were both just under 200 cars, and we were able to, under the current guidelines, actually get those cars. And they're largely I-Paces, so there's nearly 400 I-Paces in that number, which is why we see Jaguar so high in the overall rankings. Clearly, don't look at the numbers, just look at the rankings. But that's really the story behind that. But obviously, key thing for us is we're really keen to start being able to, we're really keen to start delivering Defenders as soon as we can. And really, as I say, we've got a very strong order bank and a large number of cars carried over from March, where that's our immediate priority, really, in terms of doing that. But we've seen, what's been really pleasing, probably in the last week or so, since the announcement of our plug-in hybrids on the Evoque and Discovery Sport, we've seen a fantastic response, particularly from the fleet sector. So for us, with I-Pace and those two plug-in hybrid products, I think we're feeling very bullish about our fleet prospects. And actually, if I look at the levels of orders that we've taken in the last month or so, whilst overall orders are down, actually the drop in fleet is actually not that great. So we're feeling quite optimistic in the fleet area.
The other thing that's going to change drastically off the back of this is how people buy cars. I note that you've invested again in the website and online retailing. What are your thoughts on that, and how it's going to change the way consumers buy cars in the future?
We obviously set our online sales capability up some time ago. We've been monitoring that for a while, and actually always had plans to accelerate and make that more of our offering, as we see increasingly a proportion of customers want to have an increasingly digital experience. Clearly, at the moment, that absolutely comes to the fore, where for some people, the ability to do it all digitally will be even more attractive than it was previously. So, making sure that our digital capability is really visible on our website, is well signposted elsewhere digitally, and also some enhancements that we're bringing to that. We're feeling really positive that we're well placed. And as I say, I suspect what will happen is, in this period, while social distancing and concerns over health and hygiene prevail, people will increasingly move towards digital. They may well move back afterwards, but it will probably just accelerate the whole industry move towards a more seamless, digital, transparent type of transactions.
On that point, if people are moving more towards online, where does that leave your retailers who have got big properties? They've invested a lot in them over the years. I mean, how does that fit into the online picture?
So our online model absolutely involves the retailer. So what we don't do is we don't bypass the retailer. All the transactions go straight through to the customer's preferred retailer. So first and foremost, that's absolutely central. But I think all retailers will recognise that the world is changing, and that customers want either a blend but certainly a seamless response. They want to be able to have do some things digitally, do some things physically. That challenge really to the retailer network is no different. We need to make sure that across the piece we're maximising every revenue opportunity, whether that's new cars, whether that's used cars, increasing our service base. So yeah, that's very much how we see the landscape going.
Do you think the government has done enough to help the industry through this period?
I think the government has responded very well. I mean, clearly in the early days of furlough, lots of questions, but if you think about it, they absolutely were breaking new ground in terms of this. So it was inevitable putting something in like that would have some teething problems, lots of questions. But as a general principle, in terms of the fact that the numbers that have been furloughed, the speed of payments, the other support that they put in place to support various size of businesses, has also been very positive. So certainly thus far, whatever it is, 560 billion, whatever it is, I mean, it's been a very good response, and certainly, but we would hope that is able to continue, whether it's, as I say, a gradual extension of the furlough scheme, or as we move the dialogue into one that starts to talk about stimulus packages for certain industries too.
And what does it look like for JLR when it comes to getting back to work? I mean, I take it you've got staff on furlough too. What are you planning when it comes to restarting?
Yeah, so we monitor this weekly. So we look at all aspects of the national sales company, and effectively try and plan, effectively a week ahead by saying, right, okay, are we going to need that particular part of the organisation back up again, based on the level of demand? So that could be, how many calls we're getting into our contact centre, how many agents would we need? It could be, in the event that retailing is opened up, then clearly we would look to unfurlough some of our field teams. We've already got more than 50% of our fleet organisation working today, but that's growing all the time. So we monitor it, as I say, on a weekly basis, plan ahead. It literally just takes a week for us to get people back up to speed. Really what we want to make sure is we're striking the right balance between maximising the opportunities the furlough scheme presents for us, because it's clearly important for us as it is for our retailers, but also making sure we don't come out of the trap slowly. We need to make sure that we are able to come out pretty quickly, and really embracing whatever opportunities are presented.
And overall, are you starting to see some positive signs of getting back to normal?
Yeah, we are actually, certainly, and there's lots of indicators. So if I look at website traffic, for example, whether it's unique users or active users, people actually either configuring or asking for a brochure. I mean, on the Land Rover side, those are almost back to the levels they were in March. Probably about 80% of the way. Now they did drop off significantly towards the end of March and then throughout April, but those are climbing all of the time. The numbers of inquiries we're generating are increasing, whether it's new or used. In fact, actually, I think from the beginning of April to the end of April, we saw about a 50% increase from the start of the month to the end of the month. We're seeing more and more cars called off from our compounds. So as retailers are preparing for the point where actually either handing cars over at customers' houses now, or the point where actually they'll be able to open their retail facilities, we're now seeing more and more call-offs every day. So we're definitely seeing positive signs of returning to some level of trading. Clearly not back to the level that we were at previously. But yeah, it's every day we get our daily report, as I'm sure everybody else who's looking at this does, and actually it looks a little bit better, whether that's used, after sales, or new inquiries. So yeah, we're optimistic.
And finally, Rawdon, what's the most important thing that this crisis has taught you personally?
Cool, crikey, that's a good one. I think the most important thing, I guess, it's taught us is just focus on the most important things. I think in a crisis, that actually is sometimes easier because it's really, really clear what you've got to do. And sometimes in our lives, you can get bogged down or occupied with things that perhaps aren't absolutely fundamental. So I think really focusing on the core issues, and also just making sure that communication, I guess, particularly in the context of a retailer relationship, making sure that communication flow is direct and is frequent. So literally, our retail board, we meet twice a week. We've never had more dialogue, and it's never been more necessary. And it's a good dialogue. So I think those would be the two things in answer to that question, I think.
Rawdon, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate you giving up some of your precious time to chat to us. If you'd like to hear more interviews like this one, you can log on to cardealermagazine.co.uk, scroll down the homepage, find the Car Dealer Live interview section, or join us every weekday. We're live at midday. Thanks ever so much for watching, and goodbye.